Good morning, NASNPRO. Welcome to NASNPRO Studios. My name is Denise Fuller. I am the director and one of the founders of the National Aesthetic Spa Network, but you know that because you're on one of our platforms. We are so excited to be able to do a live interview, and if I pinch her, we're not on a split screen, so she's right here. Susanne Warfield, OMG. I would say I'm fangirling out, but I actually know her really well. So she's been in the industry for over 40 years. And I'm going to have her kind of tell you a little about what she does, how she got into the industry, what she has going, and why you should join. Susanne, tell me a little bit about your career, your industry, and just what are you doing?
So this isn't the camping show. Did I walk into the wrong studio?
You did. That's the next room over. We're going to be doing some camping and scuba diving.
That camp, yes, and my hair is still wet from my morning dip in the river. But good morning, everyone. I was sound asleep in my motorhome, and I heard a knock on the door. I thought it was the police. So
wake up! We have a live.
I'm like, oops, what time is it? I'm on vacation. So yes, thank you very much for having me. So where would you like me to start in that long list of things that you...
Well, first of all, you have dual citizenship. So you actually started your career in Canada or America?
In Canada, in Toronto, Ontario.
Okay, so you went to school, then what?
Then I fell in love and married an American, which brought me to Cleveland, Ohio. Oh. And at the time, for you Ohioans out there, there was no esthetician license. And this was back in 1985, 1986. The only license was a beautician license. So I said to my husband, get me out of here. Mm-hmm. I wanted to practice in my chosen field because actually, when I left Canada, I was teaching a 2-year degree esthetician program at Sheridan College. So then we moved to Boston, Massachusetts. And Boston, or Massachusetts, only had a 300-hour license at the time. So going from teaching the second year of a 2-year degree aesthetic program and then moving to Massachusetts trying to teach a 300-hour program.
It's tough because I've taught in Florida. Mm-hmm. At 260, and you have to cram a lot.
Yes.
Into those hours.
And you have to expect the students to do a lot of independent reading. And so that didn't work too well. And so I ended up going to graduate school at Lesley College until one day my husband came home and said, we're moving to New York City. And I was like, oh. So New York City, my gosh, I'm a country girl from St. Catharines, Ontario, moving to New York City. It was pretty intimidating.
Country girl to big city girl.
Yes, and at that time, I knew how to find the state regulatory board. Of course, for those of you who are New Yorkers, you know that it's not called the Board of Cosmetology. It's under the New York Division of Licensing. Mm-hmm. Only to find out there was no esthetician license in New York. So that's 2 strikes finding my chosen career in the U.S. So neither Ohio or New York had esthetician licenses at the time. So I ended up doing the newspaper shuffle, when we used to look in the newspaper for want ads and found...
You mean not on Indeed? So this was before the internet.
Yes, and before our job list, yes. So what ended up happening is I found a job for a facialist in a dermatology practice. And I was like, what is a facialist? And I called the ad and what's a facialist? And they said, well, someone who does facials. And I said, oh, you mean an esthetician? Mm-hmm. So long story short, I went in for the interview and ended up building the practice we had 14 estheticians working in 2 offices. And it was somewhere in the 90s that I was approached by Milady to write a medical aesthetic textbook. I had published my very first article ever published in the United States in a magazine was in Dermoscope. Oh. And it was a very novel subject on disinfection and infection control and the Bloodborne Pathogen Act. So that was my very first article. The book I wrote for Milady was the Esthetician's Guide to Working with Physicians. And so that was followed up by me cornering Joel Gerson, the
So,
author.
I was going to say, so I hope everyone is following. We are now speaking about Joel Gerson. Now, who knows who he is? If you do, put it in the comments. And let us know where you're watching from. Are you watching from New York? Are you watching from California? If you are, say hi. If you are a NCEA certified esthetician, shout it out in the comments below because this is exciting. Susanne hasn't been at a conference, I don't want to say ever, but it's been a while since she's been out and about.
It's called retirement.
Shh, never. You're not allowed to retire. We need you. So, hey, we have people watching from Dallas, Texas. We're so glad you're here with us. And good morning to you. So now you are talking to Joel.
Yeah, and Joel Gerson, as you all know, wrote the standard textbook for estheticians.
Yep.
And two things were lacking from the textbook, and that was medical aesthetics, which after I had the contract with Milady to do the esthetician's guide working with physicians. And the other thing that was missing, and of course I've been working in the dermatology practice now for several years, realizing that our industry was missing the boat in following the OSHA guidelines for the...
We don't need gloves, do we?
Oh, we most certainly do. I would never do a skincare treatment without having gloves on. And, the Bloodborne Pathogen Act and the way it works, you have a state license as an esthetician to protect the consumer. What OSHA does is protect the employee, or if you're self-employed, the self-employed individual. So the fact that we have a Bloodborne Pathogen Act that protects you from transmission of bloodborne pathogens. So even though this came very popular, or it was promulgated during the whole HIV, it's not about HIV. It's about anything that would be transmitted in the blood. So, but one other thing I'd really like to point out, Denise, is that a lot of people don't understand that it's to protect you, because in your hands, you don't know how many routes of entry you have. MRSA, methicillin-resistant MRS staphylococcus, that colonizes in the nasal area. So if you're doing a facial treatment like this without any gloves on, and I've seen this more and more times again, that they then, go to their hair. And I'm sure, unfortunately, during this COVID epidemic, people started to pay maybe a little bit more attention to where they went with their hands and to their faces. And actually, can I put a challenge out there this morning?
Absolutely. You can do whatever you want.
I'm awake now. So here's a challenge for you. Have one of your coworkers watch you give a mock facial. You don't even really need a real person. But what I'd like for the other person to do is, once you glove up and you start your facial treatment, have the other person write down everything you touch. And then at the end of that 15-minute mock treatment, then go back and have that person tell you, you touch this, you touch this, you touch this. So once you have your gloves on, you're contaminated. So if you've touched all these other surfaces, well, then guess what? Before your next client comes in, you need to clean all those surfaces. So these are called work practice controls. And again, during COVID, some states really got tough on things finally, even though, hello, it's been around since the 90s. You should have been wearing gloves already. I know we're still getting pushback from schools that they're not teaching wearing gloves, and it's an integral part. And I'm sure you have a very diverse crowd. So I have to tell you, my first lecture in the United States happened to be with Dermoscope as well, and it was in the beautiful Waldorf Astoria in New York City. And I think you may have heard this story before.
I have.
And it's such a perfect demonstration of how important this is. And Lydia Sarfati introduced me, and I was the first time lecturing on OSHA, the bloodborne pathogens. Finished my lecture, and And I was this is what we need to do. And for those of you who saw me early on in my career in the 90s, this is how it needs to be done.
She's scary.
And so the first person came up in the question and answer period and said, well, Miss Warfield, if I wear gloves to do facials, my clients will say it doesn't feel the same. Mm-hmm. And in developing my true lecture style, I said, that's the same excuse men give when they don't wear a condom. Mm-hmm. Well, dead silence. I'm sure you're all laughing at home now or going, oh my God, I can't believe she just said that. But back in the 90s, that was a real issue.
And I remember doing waxing. And this was even before Brazilian. Yeah.
Before computers and before Brazilian.
Because I've been in the industry 30 years. So you're a little bit, just older, just a wee bit. But I remember doing waxing without gloves. Oh, yeah. And then when I went and did my training in Australia to become a beauty therapist, they were straining wax. Which, they were straining it, repouring it, and that was bikini, underarm. I was like, no. So I knew enough to be like, I'll do that service, but you're not going to do that to me. Yeah. Not with that wax.
I was taught straining too, back in the 80s. Uh-huh. Yeah, you would take that hot green wax and
pour it through a colander.
Yeah, and strain it out and then scoop. Yeah, we've come a long way. We still have a long way to go, but definitely.
And I can share one of our members, Nadine Torello. She had a huge spa down in Key West. And she was telling me, and she had been trained by Janet McCormick, the other co-founder of NASNPRO. I was down there doing the training for her staff. And she had just had a client come in. And as she was doing the facial, she came up in the back part of the neck and was doing a nice move. And she felt something. And she was wearing gloves. And she goes, do you have some activity? Because, of course, we're not dermatologists. We can't, diagnose, prescribe. She goes, do you have some activity back there? She goes, and the client says, yeah, something's been going on back there. So Nadine moved her neck, saw it, and she went, ma'am, you need to go to the ER immediately. And sure enough, there was MRSA in the back of her neck. Oh. She was so grateful that both Janet McCormick and myself had been on the platform saying, wear your gloves. And I had coined the phrase, no love without the glove. So, but think about if she had been doing that wonderful move up the neck, that occipital point, oh, the client is feeling so good. Yeah. But just like having a little unprotected sex, it'd be the same thing.
Well, and just one other point on that, because obviously this is a subject near and dear to my personal heart, is that in some areas, they're still teaching you wear your gloves for extractions and then take them off. And it's like, well, how do you know that the bacteria is gone and you don't?
Because you've toned and you've closed those pores.
That's right.
Come on, Suzanne.
With a non-alcoholic, yes. I mean, so that just when you think about the science of it, and I think that that's the take-home message here is we need to be more aware of the science. And again, hopefully with COVID, this has brought more attention. And we can't rely on our state regulatory boards. We need to be professionals and do the research ourselves and understand the science so that we can protect not only our clients, but protect us.
Absolutely. So you've just now written for Miladies. Then what did you do?
Oh. Okay, so I'm trying to think back to my legacy speech when Denise presented me my legacy award, and that's why I retired, because I figured I got the award, so it was time to go. But that was 2013.
2013.
It was right before Dr. Puglisi got his award, and I followed another great leader who unfortunately has passed in our industry, Horst Grellenbacher.
Yes.
I got it between Aveda and Dr. Puglisi. So yeah, that was I was in darn good company.
You are.
But I ended up self-publishing 7 other books.
Now, can we buy those books today?
Well, here's the thing. Like any famous author out there, Clive Cussler and all those guys, they've had to rewrite a lot of their books.
Okay.
Because, in some of the books they say, and we used to fax the documents you know, and we'll know who faxes anymore. So my books are not in print right now. They're sitting on a computer. If there's an esthetician out there that has an interest in updating copy, I will give you a byline. Hey, just contact me.
Hello, my name is Denise Fuller.
You seriously?
I think I've been an editor before. I have some publishing people.
Wow.
Let's talk after this.
Absolutely.
Do you think this would be a great idea for Suzanne and I to collaborate on a book? Let us know.
Well, a couple books.
A couple.
There's a couple.
That's okay.
Yeah. So
I know you have a lot of information, so way beyond my scope, but I'll be happy to edit.
Well, it ended up with laser, and I wrote the first laser book for our profession, laser safety for your salon and spa. And the reason why I wrote that book was because I walked into a very well-known spa. I'm not going to mention it on there, but I walked in and there was the key in the laser, just sitting there. And that's
bad?
Yeah, that's bad. That's laser safety officer. Your LSO should have been on top of that. So I wrote that book. I wrote a book. Here's one that I wrote. No one else can say they did this. Legal and liability issues of medical spas. And yes, I know we have medical spa associations, but I wrote it first. And I know both associations did get copies of my book.
Well,
so
I'm going to put you a little on the hot spot.
Okay.
So on top of her being an esthetician and beauty therapist, you're also ITEC certified, Sedesca diplomat. But these medical associations, are they our friends? I mean, friends. I mean, are they really for the esthetician? Do they really want to help us?
Well, I
it's just between us friends.
Yeah, and the thousands of people watching. No, I honestly don't know the answer to that question. And that's, if you've read any of my books, it's all about protecting you, the esthetician. Whenever you go to work for a doctor, I was the first one to talk about a contract. You know, you're not, and right now what's happening with medical spas, to give an example, is estheticians are going to work with doctors, and it could be a medical spa, it could be a dermatology or a plastic surgery practice, or an emergency ER or allergist that's opening up a medical spa and saying, well, I want you to work as a 1099 employee. Well, no, because you cannot be an independent contractor if you're working under the supervision of a physician. And this is where our state regulatory boards have a really tough time, because, you know, estheticians are calling our state board saying, well, can I do this procedure in Dr. Wonderful's office? Well, is it within your scope of practice as an esthetician? And so many times I hear, oh, but I work under the physician's license. No.
So if you're an independent contractor, you're not working underneath their license.
You can't, well, you're not working under their license at all. You have a license. You are responsible for what you do under your license and your licensed scope of practice. Then when medical spas came out, or when it became more popular for estheticians to work with physicians, there became this gaping gray area. And a lot of our state boards, at one point we had done a survey, 27 state boards said that once the esthetician leaves the traditional salon and spa and go work for Dr. Wonderful, they are no longer under our board. Because if you've read the fine print on your license, or not on your license, pardon me, on your rules and regulations and your laws, you have to have a licensed facility. So the only way that a state regulatory board can send an inspector into a practice. So Denise complains I did something in my salon or spa. She's going to call the state board. But if I'm working in Dr. Wonderful's office and Dr. Wonderful did not license his facility or the room that I work in, the board is walking a tight line, because they cannot send an inspector into the medical practice.
And that's across the board, all states?
No, at the time when we did the survey, and it was 27 states. But again, the issues have not changed. That if you're a licensed esthetician, you must be working in a licensed facility. And if you are doing any delegated procedures, I see that, it absolutely needs to be clear that if because nurses are responsible for subordinates. So if you're in a medical spa that has a nurse is responsible for subordinates. Well, there needs to be a clear communication structure between the esthetician and the doctor. So those are some of the things that I talked about way back in the 90s.
So what you're saying is I can call myself a medical esthetician.
Oh, God. That's it. I'm leaving.
Okay, no, we have more questions.
Yeah, that it's, I'm not sure why or how that all came about. I know for some of you have been around from the 80s. Robert Deemer first coined the phrase paramedical esthetician, that an esthetician worked in or around a medical practice. And, you cannot call yourself anything other than what you're licensed as.
So my license is in Florida.
Skincare specialist.
I'm a skincare specialist.
Yes.
I'm excited.
We are trying to get, and if we can take it one step further, and we haven't even gotten to this part, but esthetician, we only have 4 states in the country that are still spelling esthetician with an A. Esthetician in the United States is spelled with an E. Please, we have to get our profession and who we are. We have to look cohesive as a unit and as a profession, because if I'm a legislator and I'm looking at passing legislation and I see a sampling of estheticians in my state or in my district that are my constituents, and one is esthetician with an A, one is esthetician with an E, another one calls herself a medical esthetician. We need to up our game and make sure that we're following the laws set forth in the state and what your license says.
And each state is so different. New York versus California versus Texas versus Florida. Some are very strict, some are kind of loosey-goosey, and there's that gray area. And can be kind of almost like the wild, wild west.
Yeah, the phone call I love getting in our office is, I've talked to my state regulatory board and they just don't know, they don't know answers to anything. And my state's really bad. And the answer is, guess what? It's not just your state. What's really important to understand is that you should not be calling your state board to say, can I use this device? You should be contacting the manufacturer, distributor of this device and asking for their FDA registration information. If this, in fact, is a Class 1 medical device, and by the way, just because it says medical device doesn't mean estheticians can't use it. That just happens to be how they classify devices when this act came into being in the 90s. So everything is called a medical device. So depending on the classification of the device will determine what you're using it for, and what's called and I'm trying not to get too technical, but I will, what the intended use of this device is. If the intended use of this device is to cut through your skin, no, we can't use it because it's outside of our scope of practice, because we do not affect live tissue. The next thing is, what are the indications for use? And a funny kind of story that illuminates this point is that when estheticians started using, when you look at a baby, what's that called? Ultrasound.
Ultrasound.
Well, we had estheticians calling state boards saying, can I use ultrasound on my client? And this,
absolutely not.
The state board. Well, what do you need to
that?
What do you need to look at a baby for? Or why are you performing medical procedures? Well, again, it all depends how the device manufacturer, how they register the device with the Ncea, with the FDA. So the indicated use for an esthetician to use ultrasound, and I'm just going to use a very basic example, is to help hydrate the skin. The indications for use are a dry skin. So totally different from the medical usage by an obstetrician to look at a baby, because why? She's pregnant. So same technology, but being used for 2 totally different purposes. And this is where we need to start demanding more. And for all those manufacturers and distributors out there, make sure you get their FDA registration information. And if they did submit a 510K to the FDA, you also want a copy of that. Because again, this is so important for us to know that.
My wheels are kind of spinning. So each equipment, whether it's a LED, high frequency, galvanic, ultrasound, every piece of equipment should have that 510K clearance?
No.
Okay.
First of all, galvanic and iontophoresis and desincrustation, for those, I don't even know if states are still using those devices. Are they still teaching them, guys? I think they are.
They are. Does anyone out there use galvanic? Let us know.
Yeah.
Drop it down, let us know.
And same with high frequency, either using it topically or with the Viennese massage back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
We're coursing you would have your client hold the electrode.
Yes.
And so we're coursing electricity through the client's body.
I have a pacemaker, so that's okay.
Yeah, no, you'll be dead. And as an esthetician, that's a great way to kill someone. And actually, when I do a lot of expert witness work, and in New York State, there was a big case that was won because I talked about how an esthetician can kill someone with a galvanic device if they don't know the contraindications and indications for use. And they were saying, well, estheticians can't use laser, when there was a laser license, but laser is becoming safer probably than our galvanic and iontophoresis and desincrustation services.
Well, probably because there's those benchmarks and there's that clear pathway of laser certification and education, whereas the other has kind of fallen by the wayside.
Could be. I mean, and there's always going to be new technology. I can honestly say in my 44 years in this industry that I've seen pretty much everything go through, but the moment, or the defining moment, was microdermabrasion. And what's interesting is when that first microdermabrasion device came in with Mattioli from Italy, our boards were confusing it with dermabrasion, the old school rotary, taking off the skin to make it look like red meat underneath, which I don't think any dermatologist does anymore. But again, just another example of we need to be asking better questions of the people selling the devices to us. And if you ever hear from one of your distributors, oh, we don't need to be registered with the FDA, wrong, they do.
And then I always tell people, good question to ask, talk to your insurance. Your insurance company most likely should know if they're going to cover you, because they don't want to have a liability lawsuit. Now, some insurance, maybe they're not as friendly, maybe they don't. No, but they really should.
Well, I think that the buck stops with the manufacturer, because they're the ones that are responsible for making sure they've done the proper registration of the device. And when and let me say this and make this very clear. We do not want our state regulatory boards to tell us, yes, Ms. Warfield, you can use this device, you can't use this device, you can use this device. And here's the reason why. I know that we just had some elections, but at a state level, but the problem is that the people who sit on our state boards, the last time we looked, we only had 9 states that had an esthetician on the board. So,
no, I know. Yeah.
And our state boards are not manned by estheticians or people who even know our industry. In one state, I remember talking to a state board administrator who is a gubernatorial appointee. And what that means is they're appointed by the governor to run the board. Okay, so every time a new governor gets elected in your state, we could have whole new people come through that board office. And that's how government works. And so they don't know what our devices are.
Right.
So that's why, if I can say this enough, do not call your state board to say, can I use this device? Do your research. What is the manufacturer telling you that this device does? And more importantly, have they told the FDA? Because, if they're saying that this device cuts through the skin, well, by the very fact that they say cuts through the skin, it's beyond our scope of practice.
So one of the questions is, what about vampire facials?
Who's drawing the blood? Does it say anywhere in your scope of practice? Which, incidentally, at least once, if not twice a year, when you go to renew, speaking of insurance, when you go to renew your insurance policy, you need to be going to your state regulatory board, downloading a copy of your statutes, see if there have been any changes, and download a copy of your rules. And also, in some states, they have promulgated, or they have statements of intent. You can download those as well. Actually, a better way to do it is, hey, we all have email. Sign up for their email alerts.
Mm-hmm.
Go to novel idea. Go to a state regulatory board meeting. Get educated. The biggest problem we have in our industry is that we don't know enough about how we're regulated, which is, I'm sure we're going to segue eventually,
right,
once we get through all the medical questions.
So if you are just joining us, we're here live in person in the NASNPRO studios with the amazing Susanne Warfield. She, as you can see, is quite passionate about our aesthetic industry, keeping it professional. And she probably knows, everyone in the industry knows about legislation better than anyone. And whenever I have a question, this is the person I talk to. But with all of her years of education, ITech certified, Cedesco diplomat, esthetician, she decided to create an organization to support estheticians. Wow, support estheticians? That's a novel. I wonder who else does that. Who does that? Who does that? Oh, anyways, she started the Ncea. Do you know about it?
And
if you do, let us know. But Susanne, what exactly does Ncea stand for, and why did you decide to go this route?
Well, so advanced past, when I was writing my books, and I was at an American Academy of Dermatology meeting. I think it was in New Orleans, if I'm not mistaken. And I was approached by a physician and was asked, well, is there an esthetician organization? And I said, at the time, this was back in the late 90s, I said, well, we have various groups, but I don't know any that are like on the national scene. Well, we are starting, this is the dermatologist, we are starting an allied health committee, and we would like you to be a part of it. And I was like, awesome. That was like a super cool thing to get happening, because until we can provide information for physicians and vice versa about our profession and get maybe some scientific help with it, then how are we going to change things? And I have to give a shout out to Howard Murad, because Howard Murad was one of the first dermatologists that really helped our industry advance with his glycolic acid. So, and Howard was involved. Several other doctors, dermatologists in our industry. So I sent out letters to all of these associations that I could find listed on anywhere and everything. At the time, there were about 27 smaller groups. And I said, hey, we have an opportunity here. The American Academy of Dermatology has asked if we have a representative voice for our profession. And the letters were sent out. We had an inaugural meeting in New York City, and Annette Hansen from Atelier Esthétique offered her school as the place. We hired a facilitator who came and facilitated the putting together of the coalition. So the American Massage Therapy Association was a member, Associated Bodywork and Massage Professionals. I'm trying to think of AIA, Aesthetics International, which I don't think exists anymore, the American Electrology Association, any professional association that had estheticians as members were invited to join the coalition.
Now, AIA, is that what William Strunk was? Or is that
Aesthetics International? Yeah, I get confused because Bonnie Day had a Aesthetics International. It's a little confusing. I think Dermoscope still has their association.
They do.
I
just wanted to clarify because I know that Dermoscope still has that, and they, Michelle Deliard is.
Okay.
I don't want to say she's in charge, but she does a lot of facilitating and hosting of those events. So
and so we also had the textbook publishers, Pivot Point and Milady. So anyways, it was born in June of 2000, June 27th, and it was born as the National Coalition of Aesthetic and Related Associations. So
that's a mouthful.
There were no individual members, but we still had the acronym NCEA. Well, then another machination, we realized that we needed to include manufacturers and distributors. Then it became the National Coalition of Estheticians, Manufacturers and Distributors and Associations. And then the latest update was National Coalition of Estheticians Association. I just had to file all the legal paperwork. I don't remember the names. Yeah, so NCEA. So through it all, we still kept the acronym NCEA.
So National Coalition Aesthetics Alliance.
Of Estheticians Association.
So let's do this again. National Coalition
of Estheticians Association.
So if you've ever wanted to know what NCEA stands for, there you go.
Right. Well, and then now you're holding up the NCEA
I am. I'm kind of
certified, which is actually that's not the name of the association. That is the National Esthetician Certification. So I'm just going to go back. There was one question here that popped up that I think was really, someone said, how can we get more estheticians on the board? I just wanted to address that because that is a very, very important question. And I see in Tennessee, we have someone that they have 3-year terms as an esthetician board member. And esthetician, Tennessee, you are one of 4 states that are still spelling esthetician with an A. Can we get that changed to E? So we are uniform across the states, just putting it out there as a thought. But in order to get a seat on a board, it has to be in law. So if you look at your state laws, as you now are going to do 2 times a year, because we've instructed you to do that, you're going to see who the seats are on a board. They're anywhere from 5, 7, 9 people, always an odd number, so that they change. They can vote on something and have a tiebreaker. And by the way, your state administrative board, they can't vote. They don't vote. They just run the board. So once you get your gubernatorial appointees for the state board, then they are the ones that make decisions. But in every state except Arizona, Arizona is the only state I have discovered that the actual board can promulgate their own laws and rules.
Well, sorry, wasn't Pamela Springer one of the first estheticians on the Arizona board?
Yeah, I don't know whether I don't know whether she was the first, but I certainly remember
for Arizona.
Yeah,
I know that she was on the
she
board.
Was on the board.
I really do think she was the first, but it does take action. I know in Florida, I've asked to be on the board. They would love to have me on the board, but I have to relinquish my license, and then I can be a consumer.
Yeah.
And they said, but if you want to be on the board, Denise, if you want to be on a board, just for the practice and to, get the process. And at that time they had an opening on the plumbers board. I went, oh, you don't want me on the board. But that's kind of the thoughts. And so we actually had this discussion at our January event, the NASNPRO event, because we had a lobbyist there. And that's exactly what she said. We have to make this into law. But how do you do that? You can't just be like, hey, I want a new law.
Well, believe it or not, on most every state board websites, pretend you're a grade schooler, and you can go to the site and Google how is a bill passed in the state of. Mm-hmm. So what people have to also realize is that the Constitution of the United States gives each state governance over their constituents. Mm-hmm. So that's why we have different laws in every state. So what Ncea has done, just to kind of bring that full circle, is from it, excuse me, from its founding in June of 2000, they conducted 3 what are called job task analysis. And that is essentially, what is it that an esthetician should know at the end of a 1,200-hour esthetician program? So most states in our country, the esthetician license is based on around 600 hours. So at the time of Ncea undertaking this huge project, we only had 2 states in the country that had master esthetician laws, and that was Utah, and then eventually Virginia. Right. So those master esthetician laws were already in place.
And Christine Heathman was very instrumental in getting that master esthetician license, or is that right? License,
yeah.
Processed and through. So kudos to Christine Heathman.
So even though they have a master esthetician, it's based on 1,200 hours. It doesn't necessarily mean it's on what we discovered during our 3 geographically different job task analysis. So to simplify it, when Christine was working in Utah, they decided that in Utah, one little state in our country, mm-hmm. that this is what the 1,200-hour master esthetician program should be, which is great. And yes, it involved lasers, but guess what? Not all estheticians want to do laser.
Well, and also my understanding is that in Utah, and if you're from Utah, correct me, but you can do microdermabrasion only as a master esthetician. So if you're 600 hours, I almost said basic, and don't want to say that. 600 hours.
No, it is. It's a basic esthetician.
You can't do a basic microdermabrasion, which I find I'm like.
Well, and that's the one of the interesting things. And actually, if any of you want to look this up right now, as I'm talking about it, on nceacertified.org, go under About Ncea Certification, and you'll actually see the job task analysis that I am talking about under who developed the certification. So, and again, when I say geographical, because we want it, if you're going to have a national certification, I mean, if any of you are dual licensed as massage therapists, mm-hmm. they did the same thing, that you can't just take your little state and say, this is what a national certification should be. You have to take a geographical sampling, and we did it 3 times around the country. And the Midwest was in, we did, New Mexico, California, and New Orleans. And then we had our main executive meetings in New York. So we had the basics, but by doing geographically different, there are things that an esthetician in California does that there's no way we can do in New York, and vice versa. In New York, you can do laser with a 600-hour esthetician license.
Do that in
California. And again, this is because, and sometimes what happens is we get an esthetician who wants to do something right. And I'm going to just put this out here as a cautionary tale. If you have legislative connections and you want to get standards passed in your state and get a master esthetician license, please work with Ncea. Please look at all the work we've done, because what happened in one state, and I'm just going to name it, Oregon.
Oregon.
Well, and Washington wasn't a great job either, but is that an esthetician gets an idea in her head that this is what this should look like. And unfortunately, it doesn't coincide with anything else anywhere else in the country. And so what that means is that if you're licensed in another state and want to move to Oregon, in lots of cases, you're going to be told to go back to school. And I don't know about you, but I'm not going to spend another $18,000 going back to school.
Well, and it's the same thing for Florida. There's no reciprocity, not even a pathway if I ever wanted to move to Georgia.
Well,
and I've always been told, go back to school. And I'm like, I ain't doing that.
Okay. Well, and again, let's talk about the national certification. So again, for those of you who want to learn more about legislation, and you just need to look at what other professions have done. So by having a national coalition, by having a national job task analysis based on 1,200 hours, even in your own state, this is a good example. Go to what it says you need to move into your state. Most of our state reciprocity or endorsement laws is another terminology they're using. It says you must have equivalent or higher education. So I would challenge, if you're a Florida licensed esthetician or Florida certified esthetician, they don't use the term license, with your Ncea certification, which is based on 1,200 hour competency, that we can petition the Georgia State Board in order to let you get a license in that state. So again, Ncea isn't like making this stuff up. This is how other professions do it.
I thought you were.
Yeah, I didn't just pull this information. I spent hours doing the research, and obviously we also hired a legislative person to help us. So that's what we're doing, like for Utah and Virginia, because they already had their master esthetician license. We are going in front of the boards and giving testimony. And in Utah, for instance, I gave testimony back earlier in the spring, and
how'd that go?
Well, we're still waiting on the result, the outcome of it. But the fact of the matter is that's keeping someone from working and earning a living. And you know what the last thing your legislator wants to hear?
I'm not making money, so I can't pay taxes.
Exactly. And so by having these restrictive laws state by state, it's really hurting our profession because people can't move around the country. And actually the last census showed that most people don't stay in the state, where they went to school. Or where they were born.
Well, and aren't nurses having the same issue? Because a lot of nurses, whether they get married, whether they move, aren't they having the same? So isn't there a lot of talk about creating almost like an occupational reciprocity?
Absolutely. And actually this is where COVID has helped us. Because of COVID, nurses were needed. Like Florida right now is a mess. Or a hot mess, as you like to say. I like that. And
it's a summer, and when it's hot and you're sweaty and it's humid, it's a hot mess in Florida.
I like that. So what happens is the hospitals are understaffed, and so they need nurses to come from other states. So in an emergency measure, 14 states actually passed, and I'm trying to remember the phrase. It's 3 words: universal occupational licensing. Which not a national license. They did it as an occupational to show that during COVID that nurses are necessary to be moving. And I see someone here says the traveling nurses, absolutely. Well, guess what? That's exactly what we're doing with the national certification. And again, if you have any massage therapist friends, that's the closest industry to us that I can think of. They started with a national certification. So that they could get everyone on the same board. Now, interesting factoid, when Ncea started, an American Massage Therapy Association was a founding member of Ncea, they only had 14 states licensed in the country. Only
they
14.
had to start somewhere.
Well, and because they formed here's what a national standard of what a massage therapist can do. And here's our continuing education accreditor. Here's what's mandated. We think they need so many CEs every year. They were able to go into every other state and pass a bill in order to do that. So why can't we?
Why can't we?
Because it's a little more difficult. We have 27 states that still allow a cosmetologist with less than 250 hours of training to do everything an esthetician can.
And that's the roadblock.
That's the
doesn't allow
roadblock,
us.
because one of the things that we got pushback on, and I forget what state it was, is because with the schools that teach aesthetics, I mean, how many of you went to a school that only taught aesthetics? A lot of the schools teach the full Cosmo range, hair, skin, and nails.
Mine
So-
didn't do hair because I,
Okay.
well, it was called Steiner, then it went, and it's had
Yeah.
different name changes, but originally, and that's how far I go back. But I was very fortunate
Yeah.
because my aesthetic instructor was Barbara Mazzulli, and she had been and worked with Dr. Fulton,
Oh,
one
okay.
of the co-founders of Retin-A. So she came again, even though it was only 300 hours, and it wasn't just creaming and steaming. And I would always ask her, I'd be like, "Can you really make money as an esthetician?" And she's like, "Yes." And I'm like, "Are you sure?" Because I really wasn't. I mean, because first day we were cutting cotton, and I'm like, "Why is cutting cotton? Like, what does this have to do with anything?" Well, then Mark Lees came into our class, and I was just so impressed, so amazed. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to be obviously he's a doctor. I'm not, but
So he's not a medical doctor.
he's not. He
Yeah.
PhD in science.
And yeah, phys ed, I think it is. Yeah.
Okay. But we'll give credit where credit is due. He is a doctor, and he has done an amazing job with educating on acne. And that's how I learned how to do extractions. And I was like, okay, light bulb, you actually can make a career. And I was a single parent at the time. So it was really important for me to be able to make money to feed my child. But let me just go back. I wanted you, just for those that are listening, you said that with COVID, the nurses had created kind of an emergency. It was the universal.
Yeah, it wasn't the nurses, it was
Oh.
for nurses, but because legislators are the ones who pass laws. And it's a universal, I think it's universal, I'm trying to just think of the terminology. It's an occupational licensing that allowed them to cross state lines. So that is an agenda item. We're actually, Ncea is working with the National Interstate Council of State Boards of Cosmetology. Many of you have taken NIC tests in your state. They're the national organization representing state regulatory boards, and the NIC exam is on a set standard of job tasks as well, just like the NCEA, but we're only going for the master level. And so working together, we're hoping that we can do a broader education of getting legislators to understand that an esthetician does need to have a more portable license in order to work in other states. But again, like anything else, before we do that, we all have to agree on standards. You can't have estheticians going off in individual states saying, you know, the whole point of this advanced esthetician license is to do laser. Well, guess what? In a job task analysis, not all estheticians want to do lasers. There are just so many fabulous career paths that we can go through or go on to, association management and who knew.
Being an editor, doing makeup at a funeral home. I mean, there's
oncology aesthetics.
absolutely.
You know, they're medical. Just because you work in a medical practice doesn't mean we can't teach. I mean, a Vichy shower, I have no clue how to do that. I don't know I don't remember how to do body treatments and stuff like that. So
I'll just pull over there. You can hop on the
right.
massage table. It's not a bed, okay? Again, professionalism. Massage table, and I'll pull over my medical device, my GX99, which I have a lot of equipment over the years that I've picked up. And Suzanne walked into the studio here and she went, "Oh, that's like from Sedesco days." And I went, "That's how old it is, but let me tell you, it works. And if you want to get rid of those little dimples off of the derriere, let me tell you, it's a great machine. It is a workhorse." But with that said, so now we have NCEA. How do you become a member? Can I just raise my hand and just say, I love
Sure.
NCEA?
So the idea behind the coalition is that you join other organizations, you get involved with NASN. and still achieve getting your national esthetician certification to support advocacy. So make no mistake, NCEA isn't going to do conferences like Denise is doing.
Hold on, they are COA approved, so that means NCA approves our education.
Correct.
You get CEs through it. And I know everyone's a little bit scared to go to events, but it's something very needed. And when you come to a NASNPRO event, we make certain that we take your temperature. We also sanitize, actually literally spray everyone's hands before they come in, and including the vendors. We're giving you an 8-ounce bottle of the DMK ultrasound so you can spray your own space, and then also redo your hands. We've created social distancing between the sponsors and also at the tables, and it's a great day to just that camaraderie with your esthetician, spa professionals, and again, you're getting CEs.
Two CEs, right?
We were the first event out of the entire industry in January. And I told everyone that was there, I'm like, look, please wear your mask. I do not want to be responsible for killing anyone's grandma. We are professionals. We know how to behave like professionals.
Now you have another event coming up, don't you?
I do, in Atlanta, Georgia, on September 20th. So next Monday. And actually it's about 25 minutes north. I know the people in Atlanta are probably like, no, it's really northeast. Okay, I don't live in Georgia, but it's in a beautiful location, the Tanyard Creek Overlook, which actually can house almost 500 people. So we're going to have lots of space to really accommodate. I'm not giving away. Stephanie from RN Faces is giving away an Illuminate LED machine. I don't know if it's 510K clearance.
Yeah,
but
I'm sure it is.
I'm sure it is, because Stephanie is a registered nurse, so she knows all of that. That's being given away. I also have a new vendor coming on board that's going to put some goodies in the swag bag, plus all the deals and exclusive discounts that are going to be given that day, and the education from Dana King to Michael Tompkins. Michael Tompkins, do you know Michael?
Not personally, no.
Not personally?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Well, he was the chairman from iSpa.
Okay. No.
My
iSpa days were back in the 90s. I was on there.
You might be a little younger, but we just did an interview with Michael a couple weeks ago. So watch that. And if you haven't had an opportunity to go to NASNPRO TV, we have education there that you can watch complimentary, because our membership is free. Your membership is how much?
It's $65, and it's for advocacy.
Oh my God, yeah. $65. That is 10 venti chai tea lattes for me.
Well, and can I just point out that, the fact that you give all of these benefits for free, is really amazing. We charge for the advocacy. Anytime we do anything with the state, you have to hire, you have to make sure you have someone in the state that knows the laws of that state, whether it be a registered lobbyist. And that sort of stuff is not cheap. We're talking thousands of dollars. And if we want changes to be made in the industry, that's why we have the $65.
And really, for a professional association, $65 is nothing.
Right.
Like I said, take 10 or 11 times not going to Starbucks or wherever you get your coffee, Dunkin' Donuts. But I'm a Starbucks person. But, think about the years of experience that Suzanne has given. She's, not just did a quick Google search. She didn't do her Google due diligence to look and really talk to people, go to board meetings, work with legislators. She knows what she's talking about. And that's who the helm is of NCEA, and that's why NASNPRO works with her, because one, she's getting that $65 of payment, but we wanted to have a real partnerships with those that have led by leadership and continue to lead.
Well, as she says that, as I'm turning 60 in a couple of weeks.
Happy birthday.
Good skincare. But we've actually hired new staff. We actually just hired a national director of certifications. James Perry comes to us, and his sole responsibility will be working with the certification program and working with the National Interstate Council of State Boards of Cosmetology. He'll also be the one that is now going in front of state boards and for an endorsement. If anyone has any problems getting a license in another state, and if you're already nationally certified, James has his master's in education, but certifications is always what he has done. He's worked with many associations.
Nice.
So he'll be able to take us to the next level, and hopefully working with the State Council of State Boards, NIC, collectively. And that's the thing. It's a collective.
We're stronger when we're stronger together.
Exactly. And just to put it out there, I mean, we are the national certification for the United States. Cedesco, iTech, I mean, these are awesome international certifications. You can get your national esthetician certification and then go on to get your Cedesco. We're not competing. There's two totally different reasons why you would want Cedesco for the great education. Obviously, you're going to get great education with Ncea, but it's a competency-based exam that you pass with us. So once you go through, she held up the workbook. So this is a workbook. It's not just a book you read. It has self-assessment quizzes. At the end of each section are knowledge reviews where you actually have to write out the answers to the questions. But we delve into professionalism, the ethics, risk management, and business, which are what are considered soft skills that are not in your state licensing. And if your school has time to teach that, that's awesome. But then we also expand more into the medical and the ethics of it. And speaking of ethics, did you know that Ncea made the code of ethics for our profession back in 2002?
I actually did.
You did?
Because and just to toot my own horn, if you go to page,
right.
8?
It's 3, dear.
Page 3, okay. I'm the glasses on. So page 3, you're going to actually see my name, because I helped to contribute my 2 cents into this excellent manual. So for those of you that have your NCA manual, take a look, page 3. You might recognize some names there.
Absolutely.
But yes, I did know that you did the code of ethics.
Yep, and it's now being adopted by some states in order to have a code of ethics. And take a look at it. Everything is mentioned. I see our website is up there. I started to say earlier when we were talking about sign up for your state board's email. There are 10 other things you can do. If you go to our website, in the footer of the website, there are 10 steps to protect yourself, get more educated from an advocacy standpoint. So go check that out.
So if I wanted to become
Nationally
certified, is that $65 because I'm a member, or what are the steps to doing all this?
Okay. 3 steps. You have to be a member of the organization. And then the next step is purchasing your training manuals. So on our website, it's step 1. We have 3 different payment options. The total cost, $664. Again, we kept the price of this low. It has not been raised since we launched in 2007, because this is a certification that's attainable by everyone. It's not just for the chosen few, like who's got $14,000 to do some of the other certifications out there. And again, the whole point of this is to raise standards for our profession. We're not doing this to make a ton of money. It's about getting our profession to the next level. Until we can all get on the same page, legislators are listening to someone say, oh no, it's all about lasers and that's all I do all day, and listening to somebody else, well, I just do lashes. Well, no, we need to have the core of what an esthetician needs to know. And if you know sciences, and if you learn about the science and the electromagnetic spectrum, you can do laser, you can do LEDs.
What about microneedling?
Well, now, I mean, sure, you can do it. I mean, the science, you have to have, what are the precautions, what are the contraindications, but we do digress. We can do that. You should have seen us at dinner last night. So with step one, you choose which payment option. We have an installment plan, and that's $100 a month. You can pay it in 3 different steps, or you can save $64 and pay, boom, $600 in one step. And actually, during COVID last year, we launched a loan program. We were giving estheticians, when all your salons and spas closed, we were giving estheticians $500. And to complete their certification, you had a year to pay us back. We thought we'd get 30 or 40 takers. We ended up getting 187.
Wow.
It was amazing.
And how many of those 187 have completed their certification?
It's under 150.
Okay.
We did have some people. I mean, some people did experience direct hits from COVID, so personal losses, and I mean, we're not holding anyone,
You're
anyone
not going to turn
really
into a predator.
Yeah. We don't have your social security number, but you know who you are if you still owe us money, if you completed the program.
We're watching you.
Yes, we can see you. And so anyways, it's independent study. Once you get through the training manual, you're also required to have CPR, AED, and first aid, because again, this is a national certification, and some states do require estheticians to have that.
So for CPR, where can you go to get your CPR license?
Everything right now is online. So it's a certification that's good for 2 years. And you know what? Do you know that our industry is like 97% women? And for those of you who have children, elder parents, and actually, I don't know why I made the woman comment. It really doesn't matter whether you're a woman or a man. You should have CPR and AED and first aid, just basic stuff. And it also works on a dog, because I made sure my dog, he had a cut, and I needed to know what kind of cut it was. So first aid is universal.
But veterinary services are out of scope.
They're out of scope of
for
an
esthetician.
esthetician. I was doing that as a scuba instructor.
Right. So let's just, or somebody is going to be like, oh,
I'm
getting
close to a second cup of coffee here. But so anyways, where you complete the training manual, the candidate application, you get it sent in. And we've been doing online proctoring now for almost 5 years. So that means that I can proctor you, or our staff can proctor you at home in the comfort of your pajamas and fuzzy slippers, and take the exam.
And just so nobody, and I'm just asking these questions just because, just in case somebody knows, what does proctoring mean? Like what?
Proctoring means I watch you.
Okay.
So, and we've actually taken it one step better. You're sent the testing link, you download that onto your computer, and most everyone now has a smartphone. So in order to ensure test security, in the old days, you had to pick up your computer and turn it around to show me what was around in the room. Oh. Now you just pick up your phone. I'm going to borrow your phone, and you just go like this, and I say, okay, do a scan from left to right, because we have to ensure test security, because after all, that's the integrity of the credential has to be maintained. So that's how we can do it.
So think of back when you were in high school and you took your SAT test. They didn't just let anyone be the monitor. They had people from the standard,
from
standard academic testing. Anyways, and they made sure, that number 2 pencil, no drinks, no calculators. So think of it along that. So a proctor would be doing the same thing.
Yeah, you're allowed 1 piece of paper. Obviously, your training manual can't be anywhere. So no, we follow the ISO standards for testing. And James Perry, our new national director of certifications, is going to continue to diligently work on that, because we've actually had schools come on board During COVID, schools were shut down, and being that our program is all it's a can be done independent study, and that's exactly how it was designed. And so we've actually picked up over a dozen schools. So if you have a school that you're affiliated with or that you went to and you still have a relationship, they can now include the national certification in their undergraduate training. And what that means is we're graduating a student with their state license and their national certification.
Wow.
And it's not a one and done certification.
Right.
You're required to renew it. And you have to, the committee decided you needed to renew it 3 times in order to earn your lifetime credential. So
now, do you have anyone who has that lifetime?
Absolutely. Yes, because we launched in 2007.
Okay.
So that's now been,
3 years, or 3 consecutive times.
Yep.
All right.
And that's where the CEs come in. So that's why if you're nationally certified, get to a NASN event, because that's 2 continuing education units that go towards your recertification.
So we have upcoming National Aesthetic Spa Network events, educational events coming up September 20th in Atlanta, Georgia, October 18th, Phoenix, Arizona, then November 1st, Dallas, Texas. So that'll wrap up this year. I'm working on next year. So if you have any ideas where you would like NASNPRO to come and do a conference, put them in the comments. Make certain that I know. I know always January is Florida. First of all, you can't beat the weather in Florida in January. So make certain to just watch our announcements. We'll be saying when the date is. But for right now, for this year, Atlanta next Monday. In October 18th is Arizona. And then again, November 1st, we're coming to Dallas and wrapping it up. And we have some great speakers and educational lineup with that. And you can go to NASNPRO.com, become a member. It's free. You get continuing education when you go to our events. Our events, yes, you do have to pay for them, but as a NASNPRO member, you get a discount, along with all the other benefits that we offer. So, Suzanne, any last words to an esthetician?
Yeah, our 15-minute interview.
I know. We're like, oh, we're just going to be 15 minutes. But I think that, there's been so many questions, and we are going to have to go back. And I know you're on vacation traveling, but do go into our group or on our other platforms, and let's make certain that we're answering all the questions. But words of wisdom.
Wow. All I can say is, words of wisdom, or where would I like to see estheticians go? If we can become more aware of why we have licenses, what our scope of practice is, and be proud of being an esthetician, whether you work in a spa, a salon, a medical practice, or whether you work in oncology aesthetics or wellness centers, we are all estheticians. And if we are going to unite our profession, we have to agree on what our basic core training should be. Ncea believes that all states should have 1,200 hours. And in order to do that, we have to voluntarily raise our standards in order to educate legislators. And again, go back to that 10-point checklist. One of the things is to educate your legislators. But if we all work together, and as we're doing, as we've always done, it's important so that we can collectively raise the standards of our profession.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you, Susanne Warfield, for joining us at the NASNPRO studios. I welcome any additional questions or insight. If you need to get a hold of her, I know that Suzanne is always able to answer emails. They've expanded their staff, so that is great. Again, the more we can just be stronger together, the better our industry is, the better we serve the consumers, our clients, and just keep it professional, guys. And if you have any questions, if you're not certain what a pro is, reach out to me. I'll be happy to tell you. And one of them is not using products that are multi-level marketing. So no MLMs. That should be in here when we do the update. Or on that 10 point, make it an 11 point, no MLMs.
So we are doing a job task analysis
Okay.
that will be going out via email. We'll make sure we get it to you so you can distribute it to your members as well.
Would you guys like to do that? To be a part of
Participate in
that?
the job task.
You know, you have a voice. Let's use it. All right, NASNPRO warriors, and I know I've seen several Ncea certified estheticians. Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you have enjoyed this segment. We will be curating it so that it is going to be on a podcast. And if you've missed it, it will also be on NASNPRO TV. So until we meet again, have a great day and keep it professional.